Hi everybody. So the first project you're going to make for this module are going to be 3 texture collages. These collages are going to be 8 by 10 and they're going to have a real surreal or dreamlike quality to them. All of the information for this is listed on the assignment page in Camino, but I'm just going to go through and kind of explain what you'll be doing. The featured inspiration artist that we'll be looking at is Eugenia Lawley, and she is a collage artist and designer. And she plays around a lot with texture and also with scale. So you'll notice that sometimes things will be impossibly large or some things will be impossibly small. She has a real dreamlike quality to her work. She uses mostly vintage imagery, a lot of imagery from old magazine ads, and there's always something very unexpected in her collages. Sometimes she'll combine black and white with color. Other times they'll just be either achromatic or full of color. She'll have different series where she'll play around with, like, man versus nature, or she might play around with the idea of romantic relationships. She's a really interesting artist. So you're not going to be copying her directly, but you're definitely going to be drawing inspiration from her work. So we can take a look at the last few. I love that one with the mouth open and the cosmos inside. So you can see she doesn't use necessarily a lot of sources in each one, but she's really thoughtfully combining different sources. So when it comes to making your collage, you are going to search for images that you think are interesting combinations. It took me an hour to decide that I was going to use vintage images of swimmers on the beach and then space. So once you have your images and they're really clear and cleanly cut and cleanly printed out, you're going to want to start cutting things out. Now, I like to use an X-Acto knife. I find that I have much more control with a knife than I do with scissors. That's really a personal comfort level. If you're going to use a knife, you want to make sure that you have a really, really sharp blade. So if your blade is too dull, you're going to tear your paper, and that's going to be really frustrating for you. Plus, you just won't be able to get as much detail in there. If you have anything straight that needs to be cut, make sure that you have a ruler. It's safest if you use a metal ruler rather than a wood ruler or a plastic ruler like I'm using here. So here I am, I'm just cutting along that edge of the water. Basically what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to remove the water. And that way I'll just have the 3 bathers and the boardwalk there. So here are the cutout bathers. You can see all of the water is removed. And now I have to think about what I'm going to replace that water with. So I printed out a couple of pictures, different space options. And I think I like this one. I'm just going to move it around, see how I want to line it up. I want to make sure that the bathers stand out. So I want to make sure there's enough contrast between the foreground and the background. And then I have this kind of schnazzier fancier nebula. I love the colors in here and the textures, but I'm wondering if it isn't maybe a little bit too busy, and so then it takes away from the bathers. So this is what it looks like with the bathers. I haven't tacked anything down yet. This is the one with the quieter space. I think I like that better. So I've decided on this to replace the water, and now I'm just going to show you how you're going to glue it down. For these collages, just a straight up glue stick is fine. You want to make sure if you're using a glue stick that you're holding down the paper really well. I find it easiest to go in one direction at one time rather than going back and forth. When I go back and forth, then I just get wrinkles in my paper. If you prefer, you could always use spray adhesive, works really well. But you want to make sure for this one, it's just easiest and fastest for you to use a glue that's a little bit drier. So I wouldn't use like a really wet Elmer's glue or like a matte medium. So I have the back of the space picture completely saturated, and now I'm placing it on my mixed media paper. Make sure your hands are clean, and now I'm starting from the center and I'm working my way out so that I get rid of any bubbles. I find it easiest to start in the center and work my way out than rather than starting on one side and working to the other. And then after I've hit it with my fingers, I like to use a brayer. A brayer is a printmaking tool. You do not have to use them at all, so if you don't have one, don't worry about it. But if you are going to be using the art building, just know that we do have some of them in the gray cabinet in the drawing room, and you have access to that room with your access card. So here I am rolling out the paper, so you can see it's really, really smooth. You want to make sure that you have total contact between the paper and the image. Now I'm just confirming this is where I'm going to place the bathers. Looks good. So I'm going to flip that over. I want a nice clean work surface. I don't want to get glue on top of the space picture. So now I'm doing the same thing. And you can see that when you have smaller pieces of paper, things that are more delicately cut, it's a little bit fussier with the glue stick. It's easier to wrinkle things, so just take good care. Making sure I get everything really saturated, holding it down. So any glue that's coming outside of the bathers is going onto my work surface, right? Not onto my image. Okay, I'm going to flip that around. Make sure my hands are clean. And place it just where I want it. I don't have to worry about the edges because I'm going to be able to cut it down. All right, so starting from the center, working my way out, using the side of my finger. If you have small things, it's good to pat them down first. Pat, pat, pat. Pat, pat, pat. And then I'm going to grab my brayer. You could, however, just use, the back of your finger. Here I am, I'm placing a clean piece of paper on top of my collage, and then you can either use your hand or you can use a brayer. So now it's really clean, everything is tacked down very nicely, and now I just have to trim my edges. So for this, I'm going to use just a ruler and an X-Acto knife. Again, a metal ruler is easiest. Another thing to think about when you're cutting with a straight edge is that typically it'll work better for you if you put the ruler on what you want to keep. So see how I'm trimming this little bit on the left here? So I place the ruler on top of what I want to keep, and then I'm cutting the stuff that I don't want to the outside of the ruler. If I flipped it, say, and put the ruler on top of what I wanted to lose, that could still work, but I run a larger risk of kind of messing up. Maybe my hand would move and I could potentially cut into my picture. So your mixed media paper is pretty sturdy, so you might need to cut it more than once. So I might run my blade down the length of my ruler a couple of times before I even try to pull up. All right, and then the other side. So this would be placing it outside what I want to cut. Okay, so here it is, all cropped and finished. Have fun with this. I'm excited to see what you guys do.